Are we live? Live. Facebook live. Instagram live. I mean, you thought we didn't know what we were doing. And the answer is, I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to technology. Although I did win a scholarship at university in engineering. It's true, okay, because I had a great teacher. Anyway, I'm all alone today. It's just you and me, and maybe Caroline will jump on. She's probably on her third martini right now, okay? I'm just kidding. Probably only two. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Suzanne, because we haven't spent a lot of time talking about Suzanne, and I think it's important, and I'm in the mood, and I'd like to take it from the very beginning and see how far we go. I doubt if we can go all the way to what is current. Maybe we can, but I have a lot of information, and if you have read the book Two's Company, which was the last, I think it was the last book that she wrote, maybe the second last. Basically, it was about the two of us, and because we were always getting questions, how do you people do it? You're together all the time, and did you plan it? And the answer is no. It just evolved by itself. And the last 42 years out of our 50 plus years together, we were together 24 hours a day. We were never apart. It was amazing. And I'm still amazed by it. And Bruce said that we had a codependent relationship that really worked, and it did really work. We had our ups and downs, like every relationship. We got through it. I think we got through it because Suzanne was very wise for her years. And she always surprised me with her wisdom, even though she was 10 years younger. And she said to me one day, because we had decided to break up, and it was, it was probably in 72 or 3. And we owned a condo at the beach, and the real estate lady came, and the three of us sat on a sofa. Suzanne was at one end and I was at the other end, and the real estate lady was in the middle. And we were talking about, what kind of price should we put on this condo? And I said, I think what I'd like to do is, once we establish a price, is I will buy Suzanne's half. And Suzanne said, well, the reason he wants to do that is because he wants a place he can bring his girlfriends. Now, I didn't have any girlfriends, okay? This was Suzanne projecting that if we broke up, I'd have girlfriends and I'd have this beach condo to bring them to. Great. Anyway, we went back and forth, and I said, when she said that, I said to, we're talking to the realtor, right? I said to the realtor, I said, I don't want to break up. I never wanted to break up. I said, it was really Suzanne's idea. And she said, well, it was only my idea after the blah, blah, whatever the blah, blah was. So all of a sudden, the real estate lady got up and said, have a nice afternoon, and left. And we talked about what had almost happened. And we decided, and Suzanne was the one who suggested it. She said, no matter how bad it gets, let's never break up. And I said, I totally agree with that. Okay, we won't break up. And we never did. And we dealt with cancer finally got to her. She managed to beat this very aggressive cancer back for 23 years, while other women who didn't have access to the wonderful medical people we had on our team, unfortunately, those women were dying in the first year, maybe the second sometimes. So it wasn't good. And Suzanne had cancer starting in the 20s, when she was in her 20s. And she had 2 hyperplasias on her uterus. So one day someone said, you know, there's this psychic. And I said, I don't want to hear about a psychic. No, really, this psychic is the real deal. I said, okay. So Suzanne talked to the psychic, and the question she had was, why did I get cancer? And the psychic thought about it. And this was before anyone had heard the name Suzanne Summers. And so it wasn't that, and there were no books. He said, the experience you had as a young girl, you entombed. Those were his words, you entombed. And it's now just coming to the surface. And that's why you have cancer. And she had those 2 hyperplasias, she had them removed. And then in her 30s, she had a melanoma tumor on her back. She had that removed. And then in, let's see, that would be 30, that would be in the 40s. She lost her uterus. In the 50s, she had cancer of her right breast, and they did a lumpectomy and offered her a what do you call those things? An implant. And she said, no, I don't want an implant. She said, I'll wait till something else comes along. So something did come along. And I'll get to that in a little while, but I've made a few notes here so I don't forget anything. We've talked about in the past where Suzanne and I met. I was doing a series for ABC, and we had to shoot it in San Francisco, and it was a game show, and she was hired as the prize model. She'd never been in a TV studio, and the director obviously wasn't a great director because he didn't tell her what to do. He didn't even tell her what camera to look into. So when they cut to her and the announcer was saying, you won a 20 cubic foot refrigerator, blah, 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 she opened the door and she didn't know what camera to look at. And so as a result, they fired her the first day. But that was okay, because I called her, I got her number. The associate producer wouldn't give me her number, and I said, well, you'll have to choose between giving me her number or getting fired, so think about it. He said, I don't have to think about it, here's her number. And I called her, and Brucey answered the phone. I think he was probably 5, 6, something like that. And I said to him, is your mommy home? And he said, yeah. And he put the phone down, and for the next 15 minutes, I'm listening to, I guess it was a TV set, and Suzanne singing, and Brucey and Suzanne talking. Because he answered my question, is your mommy home? Yeah. And he put the phone down. So she finally picked up and said hello. And that's when our relationship really started. Did it start in the studio? Yeah. I made my way. I saw her standing on the other side of the stage, and I thought, I have to go over there. and talk to this woman, this girl woman, which I did, with one of my stupid come on lines, because I wasn't good with come on lines. So I've told this story before. I asked her to get me a cup of coffee, and she said, okay. That was our beginning. We both knew that what we had in each other was really important. It wasn't just like a flash in the pan. And she called her mother that day and said, I met the man I'm going to marry. My first impression, it's a guy thing. It wasn't love at first sight, it was lust. But it very quickly turned into love. And it was the kind of love that I'd never experienced before. Even though I had girlfriends when I was living in Canada. And we both knew that it was important. We just didn't know what it was or where it came from or why it was important. We just knew that it was. And I was living in a Japanese hotel in San Francisco, the Miyako. That's where we had our first date. And it was amazing that she trusted me to come to my hotel suite, and Japanese hotel suites. I'd spent 3 weeks in Japan, and I sort of loved the Japanese way. So I was very comfortable and at home in the Miyako Hotel. And I'd gone down to the pier in San Francisco and bought 3 or 4 Dungeness crabs, fresh out of the cooker. And we had dinner at the Miyako Hotel, sitting on a tatami mat on the floor in my suite. That was also a beginning. And we started being together every day after that. And we didn't know where it was going at all. We just knew that we wanted to keep going wherever it was going to go. And Suzanne was an extra on pretty much any feature movie that was done in San Francisco. And for the edification of those who don't know what an extra is, it's part of a crowd scene. When you see a bunch of people in a crowd on a movie, they're extras usually. So she was an extra, and what I didn't know was she didn't have any money. She became pregnant the first time she had a date. And the first time she had a date was to go to her prom. And the reason she never had a date before that was because she came from a home of alcoholics, with the exception of her beautiful mother, Marion, who I love dearly. So Marion and Suzanne were the only two who were not alcoholic. Father, most of you know, was violent and hunted down the family every night and took everything out of the refrigerator and threw it against the wall. I mean, just terrible. And Mother Marion, being a good Irish woman, used to pick him up, clean him up, take him to bed, and then go downstairs and clean up the mess that he had made from the refrigerator, and probably also throwing up. And it wasn't until she went to a program, I guess it was a 12-step, I don't know what it was. And they said to her very simply, they said, just leave him there. Don't clean him up, don't pick him up, don't drag him to bed, don't clean up his vomit. And that kind of did the trick. That's when he decided, I better sober up here. So he went to a place in Northern California, and I don't think it was a 12-step program. I think basically they just said, you got to stop drinking, which he did. He stopped drinking. and he was a little easier to be around, but I didn't like him because of what he had done to the family. They had wasted all those wonderful years dealing with this person who was out of control. And as you know, those of you who are watching who are recovering, you know that what happens when you have an alcoholic in the family who is active, the whole family gets sick. And that's what happened. And it wasn't until he sobered up. And so soon after that, Suzanne and I were in Santa Fe. We loved going to New Mexico. It was just a wonderful place to go to. It had history and it had style, and all the buildings were adobe, beautiful, really. And it was exciting, and the ruins, the ancient Indian ruins, were wonderful to explore. And we enjoyed going there in when the weather was cold, knowing that the caves the Indians lived in 1,000 or more years ago would not be populated with tourists, and they weren't. It was just the two of us. And we went to bed that night. Suzanne had sat in one of the caves that still had charcoal. They obviously had a fire in there and let it burn out. And she had sat there all day thinking. And I had been moving around from cave to cave, etc. And then that night we went to bed, and in the morning I woke up first, and Suzanne was wide awake, and I said, "What's going on? There are all these pages on the bed." And she said, "I don't know. I just had to write." And those pages turned out to be the first 60 pages in a book she wrote called Keeping Secrets. And not one word was changed. And I remember the editor said, "Oh, automatic writing." And apparently there's something called automatic writing where it takes over and you can't help yourself and you have to write. And I assume that what you're writing is something that comes from the labyrinth of your brain, that you're turning into text. And that was the end and the beginning. And everybody sobered up in the family. Suzanne's father sobered up. Her sister Maureen sobered up. Her older brother Danny sobered up. And unfortunately, the youngest brother, Michael, died at I think he was 47 years old. He had ingested a lot of drugs, and he was the last one left at home with the father. And we think things happened because Michael stopped talking. And we never asked what happened, but we suspected things happened, and Michael's life became something that none of us would want to experience. Michael has, I think he had 7 children, and I don't know how many wives, and probably didn't remember who came from whom. And he was really a nice kid. He was this soft-spoken, really nice kid. And from what I understand, he couldn't read, and yet he had, his job was driving one of those 18-wheelers cross-country, And we couldn't figure out, if you can't read, how do you know how to get to an address in a strange city? And we never got the answer to that. So Suzanne, doing extra work, she was hired to do a scene on one of Clint Eastwood's movies. And it was in a public place, and so there were probably 100 people standing around from the neighborhood watching Suzanne in her only scene in the movie. And so when she was finished, she put on her coat to leave, and the people were all applauding, like, you know, they didn't know who she was. They just thought she was a big star, until she got into her old Volkswagen, and the only way it could start was if she parked it on a hill. So she would start on compression, and a couple of times I had to push it. But she totally understood that car. She carried a bunch of toothpicks in the car, because if something went wrong with the engine, you take a toothpick and stick it in a hole in the engine. I don't know what it was. I'm not, you know, engine savvy, but the car would start going again. So she was really amazing that way. And so one day she got a call. There was a show, there was a movie that was happening. I can't remember the name of the town in Northern California. And she auditioned with George Lucas. It wasn't really an audition. She went into his office, and he said, "Can you drive?" And she said yes. And he said, "Thank you very much." And she had no money. She was living in Sausalito then, and I had moved to Sausalito. I was living on a houseboat. She had no money. I didn't know this. All this came to me after. She had no money. Who's calling me here? I don't know. And where was I? Oh yeah, Sausalito. That became the scene that was the most memorable scene from American Graffiti. Suzanne, she didn't get billing because she didn't even say the words out loud. She mouthed them to Richard Dreyfuss, who was in a car next to her at the stoplight. And she said, "I love you." And he couldn't believe it. And he rolled the window down. By that time, she had taken off. It turned out to be so memorable that years later, when she got Three's Company, ABC bought the movie, and they promoted it by saying, "American Graffiti, starring Suzanne Summers." It was like a gag. They were using this one scene that was less than 4 seconds to sell this movie, which they did, of course. And that turned out to be indirectly very important for her career, because she went to NBC to audition for a sitcom. It was the Dom DeLuise show. And the producer said, "Oh, wow, that's very nice reading, thank you. You got a call back." So she went out and talked to the receptionist and said, "Where do I go?" And the receptionist said, "Just go to the canteen, the restaurant." So she did. There was nobody there. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And in walks Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson walked over to her and said, "Hello, little lady, what's going on?" She said, "I'm here to audition for Dom DeLuise." He said, "He's a buddy of mine, I hope you get it." And she didn't even have a photograph of herself to give to Johnny. But she did have a book of poetry that she had done called Touch Me. So she handed them the poetry book. And that was Wednesday, and Friday she was on the Tonight Show. And every time she'd go on, she was on. Carson loved having her on, so she'd be on once a month, and she'd read poetry to him, and he would do eye takes to the camera, and it was just this charming back and forth segment between Suzanne and John. And so Suzanne had done 9 pilots, and we always joked with her, you see, if you've done 9 pilots, you must be a great stewardess. Terrible joke, okay. But she did 9 TV pilots, and none of them sold. And she decided she was going to redesign our kitchen and teach cooking. And I said, whatever you want to do. And we got a call from ABC because Fred Silverman, who was the genius behind programming Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, and eventually Three's Company. It was a powerhouse trifecta. And he had seen her on the Tonight Show a lot. Because when Johnny was on the show, we all watched it every night. Maybe not the whole show, but we certainly watched the monologue. And we all talked about it the next day. So he was watching her on the Tonight Show. Now, they had shot 2 pilots for Three's Company to find the right Chrissy Snow character. And unfortunately, both women who played the part in the 2 pilots did not test well. And the show was due to start production in 3 days when that phone call came in, and Suzanne said, I'm not interested in auditioning for anything anymore. I'm done with the business. I'm going to teach cooking. And we talked her into going. Just go. It's like, just go. It's Friday. So you'll go, you'll come home, you'll be all dressed, and we'll go out for dinner. So she went, and she went with the right attitude, because she didn't care if you got the job. That's the best way to go get a job. So she walked in, and she said it was a bunch of guys in suits, and she did a reading with this woman who turned out to be Joyce DeWitt. And then she went home. And the phone was ringing again when we got home, and they said, you got the part. That was Friday, and the show started production on Monday. And Suzanne still had a lot of small town in her, which I loved, really. I was born and raised in a big city. There was no small town anybody I knew. And she was charmingly naive about some things. And so when she got this part in the show, on Monday, they have what they call a read-through before they do the show, where everybody, the producers, the directors, the cast, hair, makeup, anyone associated with the production, meets in one big room. They sit around a big table. It's called a table read. So she announced to everybody when she walked in, I've never had an acting lesson, but I'm a really quick study. And in retrospect, we all wondered, what did all those people think? I mean, Joyce DeWitt was at UCLA. She was very accomplished. And in fact, ABC had a deal with her before Three's Company. They saw her work and decided this woman knows what she's doing, so they made a deal with her to hang around until they found the right show, and the right show was Three's Company. So Anyway, before Three's Company, and Suzanne was trying to make some money, and Bruce had been run over by a car, really bad accident, and he still has a scar, big scar. And he was in the hospital for weeks, and the doctor had said 50-50. And he lived, obviously. You've seen him, you've heard him. And but the bill was $20,000. The woman who drove the car that ran over him had no insurance, and Suzanne had no insurance. So the hospital bill was $20,000. And she's hired to do this shoot for Mexicana Airlines in Mexico. So, yeah, she's going to take it. So she goes down with they flew down in a private plane, little rickety single-engine plane, with the photographer and sound and costumes. I don't know who else was there. And so they were down there for a few days, and the photographer said that he said, I shoot for Playboy. He said, why don't we do some test pictures, because if they choose you, they pay $20,000. And Suzanne thought, wow, I could pay off the hospital just like that. So she was very uncomfortable with these test pictures, because it meant that she was either taking off all her clothes or some of her clothes, and she was just really uncomfortable doing it. But suddenly the idea of getting $20,000 in her life that she could use to pay off the hospital, she really wanted to do it. So anyway, everyone goes home. We go back to Los Angeles, and she gets a call from Playboy. They want her to be the playmate of the month. So I drove her to the Playboy building on Sunset, and two of us sat in the car looking at each other, not talking. And I said to her, she went to open the door, and I said to her, if you do this, you will always be known as the playmate of the month, which is not a bad thing. I just wanted her to know that would be her label. Okay, that would be the thing that when they would introduce her, that would be her introduction. So she decided not to do it, and we drove off. And then the guy who took the test pictures heard about that, and he called Playboy and he said, you can use those test pictures. And she had not signed on to allow him to use those test pictures for anything other than to show Playboy, but not to print them. Playboy printed them because that's all they had. And she was a big star on Three's Company, and they had these pictures, so they took a shot and they printed them. And ABC heard about it, and the producer said, we're actually talking about letting you go. I mean, this is like, we live in such a new country, okay? Like, this would never have happened in most European countries. Paris, for example, okay? They'd go, big deal. Nude pictures, so what? But we're such a uptight young country, and ABC was thinking of dropping her from Three's Company, and she had a commercial account for Ace Hardware that upped their, what do they call it? Their recognition factor by 600%. And I remember when we made the deal, and they wanted to put her in coveralls with a hammer or something like that. We said, totally wrong. You know, put her on stage at Caesars in Vegas wearing a beautiful gown to promote Ace Hardware, and they did it. And they really got their money's worth. It was really great. But in the meantime, Ace Hardware now has jumped on the bandwagon. They heard about ABC thinking of dropping her. So Ace Hardware dropped her. They said, we can't have this. So at the time, Suzanne had a really savvy PR guy. And he said to her, and he was very smart, he said to Suzanne, there's this journalist who writes a regular column that goes national for the LA Times. He's downtown. He said, I want you to go there by yourself. Don't bring Alan. I'm not going to go with you. Just go all by yourself. So she did. And she told him her story about her son being run over, the $20,000. She told him everything. I think I have to have a drink. Casa Dragones. He wrote this column that went national, and I can't remember what he said, but ABC came back and said, everything's fine, Suzanne. You know, we just, you know, we had to go through that exercise, but we don't want you to leave. And Ace Hardware came back, same thing. Matter of fact, the president, I think it was the president of Ace Hardware, went to Tiffany's and bought her a couple of earrings, beautiful earrings. And we went after Playboy for running those pictures without Suzanne's permission. And I won't tell you what happened, but they admitted they were in the wrong, and they made so much money from that edition of the magazine. They were happy to share the wealth. But it was kind of a sleazy thing to do, really. They just, I mean, they were licking their chops thinking, this is, you know, Three's Company was like, had gone to #1. And Suzanne's demographics were the heaviest of most, if not all, of the women on television at that time. That was a rough one. That was really a rough one. Because she had struggled all her life. There were nights she talked about, and I didn't know any of this. There were nights she talked about where she only had $1.50, no money, no money. So she was able to buy a small piece of fish and a potato. And that's what Bruce had for his dinner. And she said, oh, well, there was another dinner where all I had in the house was one potato. I had no money, I had one potato. And she said, I took that potato and I had butter. I melted butter inside the potato, and I had sour cream, and I put sour cream in, and then I chopped it all up on the inside. And she said, I sat there with Bruce while he was eating it and talking about, isn't that the greatest potato you've ever had in your whole life, Bruce? And he said, yeah. And there was an occasion where it was on Bruce's birthday, and they went to the seafood place in Sausalito. I can't remember the name of it. And Suzanne ordered a dozen clams for herself and a dozen for Bruce. And then she said to Bruce, "Would you like some more?" And he said yes. And she checked to see if she had the money to pay for 3 dozen clams. And I don't know whether she did or didn't, but she ordered them. And Bruce loved it and ate them up, and it was a great birthday dinner with his mother, and the two of them were very close. It was mother and son. And the reason she had no money ever is because, first of all, she had won a scholarship to a Catholic university for women in San Francisco, and got pregnant the first year she was there, so they said goodbye to her. And the boy who was the father did not provide any child support, none. And then after the divorce, no child support, no alimony, nothing. So it was Suzanne, and she wasn't trained to do anything. She couldn't get a job as a waitress because they said you can't stack. She got a job working for a young lawyer, and it was just a young lawyer and her, and she was sitting in the outer office, and he was in his office, and he called her in to dictate a memo, and so she took it in shorthand. She knew how to write shorthand, which amazes me. And after he finished the dictation, she went out to her office, to her little reception desk, to then type up what she had written. And she couldn't read anything. She couldn't interpret anything that she had written in shorthand. So she picked up her purse and her coat and just quietly left. That was the end of that job. Then she had a job working in a bar, and she was the one who took the drink orders. So she'd go to a table of 5 people, and this one would want this, and this one would want that, and this one wants a rum and coke, and this one, etc. And she'd go to the bartender, and the bartender would say, "Okay, so what?" And she said, "They all want rum and coke," because she couldn't remember the names of all, because she wasn't a drinker. She didn't drink. So that was another job that went sideways. Anyway, we had some really fun times together. A friend gave me a sailboat, a trimaran, and I had it tied up to my houseboat in Sausalito. And one day I was all by myself. I had nothing to do for the rest of the day, and I thought, I'm going to take this sailboat out. I'd never sailed in my life. But I thought, what's the big deal? It's got one sail. Okay, it goes this way or this way. So I took it out, and everything was great. And I'm skimming along, and all of a sudden, I'm underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, where the winds are coming from everywhere. You don't know where the wind is coming from because it's coming from everywhere. And I can't steer the boat. And there's a naval base in San Francisco Bay, and there was this giant aircraft carrier or some giant ship that was coming right toward me. And I thought, I'm history. So I let go of the sail, and the wind grabbed it and did what I tried to do, and it moved me out of the way of this big ship. But I did get the whatever you call that, when the ship goes through and it, you know what that is. I got that, and I thought, my little sailboat's going to tip over. And then I started thinking, San Francisco Bay is famous for sharks. That's all I needed. So anyway, a guy rescued me. He hooked a rope to my sailboat, and took me back to my houseboat, Good Samaritan, and I kind of sailed part of the way myself. And that was the end of the sailboat. I gave it away that afternoon. I'm done sailing. So we had a lot of wonderful experiences, memorable experiences. And fortunately, starting in the 60s, I was a maniac filming everything about the family, everything. Eating, laughing, talking, joking. It didn't matter what we were doing. I had a camera running. This is before tape. This is when we were shooting three-minute films. So every 3 minutes I had to change the film. Today, I have hundreds of hours that I had never looked at. I just put everything in a big box, like 3 big boxes, and stored them. Never looked at anything. And one of the reasons I did this was because I had never met my grandparents. Hitler got to them first. And I had pictures of them. Those pose pictures that people took in the early 1900s. And I had that, but I craved wanting to hear them talk or laugh or eat, or I just wanted a little more than a photograph. And of course, there was nothing. So that was one of my motivations for filming the family, because I thought, one day, there are going to be future generations of Hamels and Summers, and wouldn't it be great for them to be able to look back to see how our family today was living? But think of 100 years from now, or 200 years from now, they're going to have this incredible resource. And I plan on putting it into a digital box that only can be accessed by the immediate family. And so that they can go in there and watch anything they want to watch. I'll put hundreds of hours of film and tape in there. It'd be a great resource. And at the same time, I've screened, I don't know, a lot. And so has grandson Zion. And who's my eldest grandson. He's great. And so we're producing a documentary with a studio, and we've already started, and with the back and forth, and it's going to be a great documentary. It's a Suzanne documentary. It's going to be a great documentary. And so that's one project that we have going on right now that's wonderful. And if you love Suzanne, you're going to love the documentary. And it's not just going to be how wonderful Suzanne is, because we've had some dark experiences in our life, and that's going to be in the documentary as well. I don't want the documentary to be 100%, wow, Suzanne, what a great person she is. I don't want that. I want it to be real. And real is we all have stuff in our life that is not something that we're happy about, but we had to get through it. We had to deal with it and get through it. And one of the things that will be in the documentary, it will probably be heavily featured, is her time on Three's Company. And here's the way it works with television shows that are wildly successful. After you've been on for 5 years, if the producers and the network want to continue, you renegotiate a new deal because the old deal is expired. So in order for everyone to continue, you have to negotiate a new deal. And we were prepared to do that because she loved working on Three's Company. She would come home and she'd be so high from the stuff that she did with John and Joyce, and she just loved it. And so Laverne and Shirley had renegotiated their deal with ABC, and in the industry, people talked about what an incredible deal it was. So the president of ABC, a gentleman by the name of Tony Thermopoulos, he has great hair, Tony. He decided that to stop women from asking to be paid what the men were making, they should fire the biggest star in television, a woman. And that would do it. Women would never ask to be paid what the men are making. And I'm thinking this is craziness, okay? Because sitcoms only succeed with chemistry. And Suzanne had unbelievable chemistry with John Ritter. I mean, she would talk about the fact that when she and John would get into a riff, they'd be like playing ping pong. He'd hit the ball to her, she'd hit it back. He'd hit it to her, she'd hit it back. And we thought, that's crazy time. You're going to kill the show. And so the president of ABC went to the head producer of Three's Company, and he agreed to do it. Now, no experienced producer, which he was, no experienced producer would agree to sacrifice chemistry on the #1 television show in the country. I don't want to go into why he agreed to do it, because it was a stupid reason, and there was a lot of ego associated with it. And all I can tell you is that he despised me. And when Suzanne mentioned to him that we were getting married, he said, "Alan will ruin your career. You'll be nothing." He said, "Don't do it. Don't do it. I've been in this business a long time, and I've watched this happen. Don't do it. Alan will ruin your career." Well, he did it. And the show should have run like all major hit shows, 12 years, 13 years. I think it only ran for another, I don't know, I think it ran maybe 7 years or 8 years, and that was it. That was it. So there was huge sacrifices made when they fired Suzanne, because they tried to replace her with one woman. The producer had said to ABC, "Don't worry, I'll get another blonde in here. I train him like a SEAL." Those were his words. So they brought in this young woman to take over for Suzanne, and she was Suzanne's cousin, not for real in the show. And unfortunately, they made her sit for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, watching Suzanne, hoping that she would act like Suzanne, which of course, those things don't happen. You can't do that. So they discontinued her and brought in another woman, and people just missed Suzanne. It's as simple as that. People were pissed off that for whatever reason, they never understood why, they removed Suzanne. And I've talked with people in the industry, they said that firing Suzanne Summers was the biggest self-inflicted wound in the history of television. And they probably sacrificed billions of dollars in terms of network licensing, syndication, and they even have a new business. They actually sell the scripts to other countries so that other countries can do their own version of Three's Company. They lost all that. The show should have run for at least another 5 years beyond 7 or 8. And it didn't, and it sort of disappeared. That was it. The show was canceled. And unfortunately, oftentimes, ego gets in the way of making a good creative decision or a good business decision. And in all the deals that I've made in this business, I've never had a deal fail for financial reasons. If it fails because of ego. And, to people who know what they're doing, ego doesn't enter into the equation at all. So, anyway, I went in to renegotiate Suzanne's deal. I actually had gotten a call the night before from someone who was an executive with the parent company in New York, and we had a mutual friend. So the mutual friend gave him, he asked the mutual friend, he knew that the mutual friend knew Suzanne, could I have Suzanne's number? I have some important information. So he calls, and I took the call, and he said, we are not having this conversation. He said, I came out of a meeting today, he said, they have decided to hang a nun in the marketplace, and it's going to be Suzanne. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, in the old days when the Romans were conquering everybody, they'd go into a new town and they'd grab a nun and hang her in the marketplace, so that everyone would say, okay, we better not make these guys mad. That was psychological warfare, essentially. So I said to the guy, I said, that'd be a really dumb thing to do. He said, I agree. He said, when that came up in the meeting, he said there were people in that meeting who questioned whether that should actually happen or not. And he said, but it was really left up to the president of ABC and the head producer, writer on Three's Company. And they cooked it up and they did it. And it was tragic, really tragic. We met, we were in Israel 4 years ago. And we had some time with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And he was a little late for the meeting. He walked in, he said, I apologize, I've been running a war. Apparently 700 rockets had been lobbed into Israel from Gaza. And he and his generals were dealing with it. So he walks in, he goes right up to Suzanne. And he said, I know all about the books. He said, however, for the longest time in Israel, we only had one TV station, not network, TV station. And he said, we only had one sitcom. And that sitcom was Three's Company. And he said, I can't tell you how many times I've watched Three's Company. Now, another group from Israel, before we went to Israel, they introduced themselves on the phone to me. They said, we are like the 60 Minutes of Israel, and we'd like to come to Palm Springs and interview Suzanne. So we set it up, and they came to Palm Springs, and while the lighting and the cameras are all being set up, I'm talking to the producer. The producer tells me the same thing, that he has watched Three's Company over and over and over again, and he starts reciting dialogue from the show. He's now telling all the jokes. It was amazing, really amazing. And I thought, when people get so hooked into a show like that, they want it to go on forever. Why not? Okay? If you know, I guess it was on Tuesday night in that 8 o'clock block. Oh. Excuse me, I'll get rid of this right now. Hi, Mark. I'm just on a Facebook Live and Instagram if you want to watch your favorite human being.
I'm watching you.
Oh.
I see you answering the phone. I wanted to tell you that you look gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I don't see you, I see you look gorgeous.
Thank you. That's all I needed. I'm getting rid of you. I'm getting rid of you. I'll call you right after the show. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. He's actually watching. He's a gentleman that we are working together. Our organization is working together with his organization. He's great, very smart, savvy, smart and savvy, and cool. And I love this man. And I don't use the word love casually. So, anyway, after I walk in to renegotiate the deal, and the lawyers are there, and the producer was there, and I can't remember who else was there. And so I told them what we were thinking of relative to a new contract. And the head producer lost his mind, and he was a chain smoker. And he came over and put his face right next to my face and said, "You want me to share my blood and sweat with her?" I mean, that's what it sounded like. I said, "Yeah." Anyway, they said, "Okay, she's fired. Bye." So I went home, and we were living in a multi-level house then in Venice. And I walked in, and Suzanne knew the news was not good news because the way I opened the door, she told me, she said, "I could tell by the way you opened the door, and you weren't in a hurry to walk up the steps." She was on the mezzanine. She was sitting in the mezzanine. So I walked up to her and I said, "You're out." And she couldn't believe it. She got teary. I said, "They're crazy. They've lost their minds there at ABC. They're crazy. And their future is not good. You know, after all the high fives, reality is going to set in for all those guys. And I'm sure the ratings are going to plummet, and people are going to miss having that wonderful connection to Suzanne, connected to John and Joyce." And I said, it's going to hurt the show. It really hurt the show badly. So we sat around for a few months, and we talked about everything. And one of the things we talked about was, okay, so what now? And Suzanne said to me, "You know, I've always wanted to play Vegas." I said, "You've always wanted to play Vegas?" She said, "Yeah." She said, she said, "I remember in high school doing Guys and Dolls," and she said, I can't remember the name of the guy who was a journalist, and one of the characters was based at Walter Winchell. One of the characters was based on Walter Winchell. You'd have to be probably over 60 to know who Walter Winchell was. But he was on radio every day, and he was, people listened to him. And he turned up to see Guys and Dolls. I don't know who arranged it or what happened, because they were doing it in the little town of San Bruno in Northern California. He was in the audience, and after the show, he walked up on stage and he said to Suzanne, "You're going someplace, sister." And next day in the paper, on the front page of the paper was a picture of Suzanne and Walter Winchell. And because of Walter Winchell, Suzanne got a scholarship to this Catholic girls' university in San Francisco, which she went to for a couple of months. And then, by the way, the reason that this was her first date to go to the prom. She, even though I guess she was probably 16 or 17, maybe 16. No, she would have been 7. She would have been 17. And the reason she never had any boyfriends before that was because they would have to come to the house to pick her up to go to the movies or go dancing, whatever it is. And she knew that her father would humiliate and embarrass everybody. So as a result, she didn't date. She had a lot of offers, but she didn't date. The reason she dated this guy is because he was a good baseball player, and her father loved baseball, and he coached a local baseball team. So he was cool with this guy. And so that's why she dated him. And then she became pregnant, first date. Anyway, getting back to her wanting to go to Vegas. I said, okay, I'm going to go to Vegas, and I've got appointments at 3 hotels. I said, I'll call you at the end of the day. So I went to 2 hotels. I think it was the Sahara and I can't remember the other, maybe the Desert Inn. Anyway, 2 hotels, and they both were very nice. They offered 2 weeks, and the money was really, really good. And I turned both down. I said, and the guy at the second hotel said to me, why are you turning it down? I said, because we're not here for 2 weeks. I said, this is going to be our business. I said, I need more than 2 weeks. He said, how much do you need? I said, how much can you give me? And he said, it's my granddaughter, Violet. Hello? Hi, why are you calling me? I'm good. Yeah, I'm on live. Okay, what time is it? Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm just talking about Vegas and a couple other things, and I'm gonna wrap it up. But thank you for calling. I love you so much. Okay. Okay. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. I love my grandchildren. I keep pushing them. Don't wait too long. Okay? There are 3 of them who are living with significant others. And they're really happy. And so I'm pushing them, start thinking about having kids. Don't wait too long. Well, we'd like to be more financially safe. We'd like to know more about what it's like to... Nobody knows what it's like to have a baby until you have the baby. And once you have the baby, you're on a fast track to learn what to do with your baby. And you can read all those books, it means nothing. At least the ones I've read, it means nothing. And you just got to jump in with both feet and experience it and just do it. My parents didn't have any money when I was born, and it didn't seem to stop them. Anyway, so I go to the MGM Grand. And in those days, Vegas was still run by the boys. And I go to the office of the president. I didn't want to go to the entertainment director because I knew I'd meet with the entertainment director, and then he'd have to go to the president to get permission to do whatever I wanted to do. So I thought, I'm just going to make an appointment with the president, which I did. And I walked in and he's writing. He doesn't even look up and he says, "What do you want?" And I thought, he's like all my uncles, okay? Tough talking guy, heart of gold. I said, "I want a 2-year deal for Suzanne Summers and I don't care what the money is." And he said, "Why do you want a 2-year deal?" I said, "Because whatever she does succeeds." And I said, "I've just been offered 2-week deals." He said, "Oh yeah, the 2-weeker." He said, I would have turned it down too. He said, "I've got Dolly, and I've got Engelbert, and I've got Tom Jones, and I've got blah, blah, and blah, blah, and blah, blah." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Some of them have 1-year deals." He said, "But, and a couple have 6 or 8 month deals." He said, "So I'm going to give you a 2-year deal." And I said, "And I don't care what the money is." And I said, "I'll tell you something. If we get to the end of the first year and you're not happy with what Suzanne is doing, the revenue she's bringing in, I'll cancel the second year." We shook hands and that was it. And we started working in Vegas. And in 1986, Suzanne was named Las Vegas Female Entertainer of the Year, and she shared the stage with Frank Sinatra, who was named Male Entertainer of the Year. And Frank and Barbara were neighbors of ours, and we would see them fairly often. And they were great, great, great people. And you know those stories about Frank? I never saw anything like that with Frank, ever, ever, ever. I mean, we go to this one restaurant, and I remember saying to him one night, we were sitting in the restaurant, there were just the 4 of us. There was no one there. I said, "Are you sure the food is going to be fresh and good, Frank?" I said, "Obviously, no one cares to come to this restaurant." And it turned out that the guy who owned the restaurant took no reservations that night because Frank was coming. So Frank ran back and forth to the kitchen to bring out more clams and bring the clams to the table. And then he said, "Come with me." We went to the bar, and he said, "You know, what was Suzanne like?" And I said, "Probably a glass of champagne." And he said to the bartender, "Give me your best bottle of champagne." And I said, "Frank, she's probably not even going to finish a glass of champagne." He said, "It's okay. It's okay." And he was like that. We'd go to their house for screenings on Sunday. And he had like a serious projector with a professional guy to run it. And just, 10 minutes into the movie, that's when I start thinking about, I sure wish we had some nice, fresh, hot popcorn. And the guy came in with a bowl of popcorn, okay, like that. So we didn't want to live in Vegas. We didn't want to live in the hotel for sure. So we bought a bunch of land 25 miles northwest of Las Vegas, and we built this beautiful adobe ranch, very authentic. Even the plaster was adobe plaster. We had to bring a 93-year-old plasterer out of retirement to teach the young guys how to do the adobe plaster. And the contractor I hired was 27, had only built houses for under $100,000. This was 1980, when you could build a house for under $100,000, probably less than that. And he brought his wife and his kids to meet us the next day, which I appreciated. So he said, "When do you want to be in?" I said, "Christmas." He said, "Christmas?" He said, "That's 3.5 months." He said, the trades are going to make the same money driving for 5 or 10 minutes in Las Vegas as they would driving for 20 or 25 minutes to get out here. He said, I'm going to have trouble getting the trades. I said, okay, tell all the tradespeople that I will be out there every day at 3 o'clock and pay them in cash every single day, okay? So they started working 7 days a week because they loved the cash, and they'd come out, they'd bring their wives and their kids, and the kids would run crazy in the desert, and the wives would sit around drinking coffee and giggling, and the guys would plumb or electric, whatever they did, okay? We were in at Christmas time after 3.5 months. I thought, we're in Vegas. Everything is cash in Vegas, so let's, what do they say? Money talks, cash screams. True. Anyway, I think that's it for today. I have a lot more I could talk to you about. I didn't realize that I was speaking that long. And I have to call my dear friend Mark back. And then I have Zion, my eldest grandson is here, and my son Stephen is here. And the three of us are going out for dinner tonight. I love doing that with my family. It's great. I like doing anything with my family. So anyway, thank you. I didn't even mention a product. Yeah. I apologize because we got some great ones here. Yeah, this is the Manuka honey line, which is wonderful. I don't know. If you haven't seen it, go to SuzanneSummers.com and check it out. This is the organic hand lotion, Suzanne Organics. This is the Nourishing Body Lotion. I just read something great about it. This is one of my favorite products right here, okay? This is refined coconut oil along with raspberry seed oil, broccoli seed oil, and argan from the argan trees in Morocco. Maybe there's one other thing in here. Once you use this, okay, I use it after every shower or at night when I wash my face before I go to bed. I'll use it on my face. It's wonderful, and it'll last a long, long time. I mean, you just don't use that much of it, okay? There's like, I don't know, maybe this thing's only 25%. I could do my face with that. So if you do go to SuzanneSummers.com and you're checking out all of our product, this is the Nourishing Body Lotion. Lotion pour le corps for our French-speaking audience. This is the body butter. I love body butter. This is the cocoa mango, okay? Cocoa mango. Wow. If I was really hungry, what is this? This is also body butter, and this is the peppermint cream, or beurre pour le corps. Oh, beurre is what? Butter, right? Oh, that's what it is, body butter. Anyway, thank you very much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. I hope I didn't push too far into your evening because I lost track of the time. What time is it? Wow. Wow, we've been on for an hour and 20 minutes. Anyway, thank you for joining us. I look forward to being with you again real soon. Okay? Mwah. Now I put on my other hat because now I have to go behind the camera, whoops, and turn off the cameras. We all wear a lot of hats in this business. Okay, let me see if I can figure this out. Okay.